Welcome to the D6 Family Ministry Podcast, a place where ideas, principles, and personalities come together to give you a ministry advantage that empowers the church and home.
I don't know anything more important in our society or in the kingdom of God than to help the church, help the family.
Discipleship is not an event, it's a way of life.
And one day it just hit me that discipleship at home was not about doing more. It was about inviting Christ into what we were already doing.
The goal of family ministry is not families sitting on the couch holding hands and singing Kumbaya. The ultimate goal is families that love God, love people, and make disciples of all peoples.
So that's why you're here. You're here to say 1 hour a week, as significant and as awesome as it is, we know that it's not enough and we want to be intentional with every hour.
You're listening to the D6 Podcast. Here are your hosts, Marianne Howard, Ron Hunter, and Josh Wooten.
Well, I'm ready for this episode. And when I was thinking through Kim's topic, we all had our MC meeting and we were talking about how to launch into this, and we all agreed on one question. So I'm just going to kind of give our listeners behind the scenes on that, how we did this. Josh, I think you were the one who might have come up with this question, but the question that we wanted to ask our listeners and ourselves are, what is our favorite moment in ministry where a child disrupted the moment? And what did that look like, and what was the background to it?
Oh my goodness, I have so many stories I could share. I'll go two really quick. Once there was a tree outside of our church that my son just loved to climb. There were certain members of our congregation that did not like the fact that my son liked to climb this tree and made that opinion very vocal to me at times. And I thought, it's a tree. He's a boy. There are certain things and laws of nature you cannot fight, but I will try my best to keep my son out of the tree. He got dubbed Zacchaeus really quick, as he would just sit up there in the tree. And often one service I'm preaching, and I have somebody come to the back of the room and wave their finger at me and like trying to get my attention. And I told them, hold on, I'm kind of busy, have an audience here. And they're like, no, we need you to come really quick. Well, it turns out my son was hanging by basically a shoe from the top of that tree. He'd climbed up and almost fell out. Fortunately, his leg got caught and he was just dangling there. And so that was a slight disruption from a message. And then just like this past the Halloween, we were in service, and all of a sudden you hear a little bit of mumbling, some people laughing, and the pastor stopped in his message, and I see his eyes get big, but he kept on going. But as I look down, there is a kid wearing, I kid you not, of all masks, a devil mask. And this kid's about 7 years old, and he is going down the middle of the aisle. And church, main service, 500 people in the auditorium. And he is just doing this thing. And this poor kid in a mask of the enemy rolling down the middle of the aisle. And our pastor didn't break. I could not believe he didn't break.
Oh, my goodness.
Getting him in a medal. But yeah.
Wow. Well, speaking of not breaking, that sounds a little bit like my story. When I was on staff prior to being a lead pastor, one of my duties, when you're in a smaller church and you're on staff, you kind of fill in multiple roles. And I kind of grew up leading in children's church, leading a different part of the children's church program, kids worship, and love kids ministry. And for many years I did that. And so when I was on staff, that was one of my roles, was continuing on the children's ministry of church and overseeing that. Well, I would use that time also to deliver the Bible lesson. I had other volunteers and helpers, but I was in there and all the kids were sitting on the floor around, and I was in this real good story. And, with kids, your stories have to be short. They have to be, real good intro, real good story. And then you want to give them that takeaway. What are you going to do with it? And I had nailed my time. I was good on the intro. 3, 4, 5 minutes in the story max. And I was closing this thing out with a really good heartfelt moment. And a little boy right up front raises his hand up, and his name was James. And I was trying my best to ignore James because you never know what's going to come out of James's mouth. And this was a serious moment. And every time I would ignore and try to finish my point, because I was like 60 seconds from being done, he would just pop his hand up even higher, just with that urgency. And that became more distracting than me ignoring him. And so finally I said, "What is it, James?" And he says, "Mr. Ron, did you know you've got a hair standing up on the top of your head, just one single hair?" And, the moment was over. I mean, nothing that I could have said could bring that back together at that moment. It was just done. And so, unfortunately, I wasn't as good as your senior lead pastor there, Josh, in previous church where, I could keep that going. We just needed to pray and get done then.
Mine is very similar to Josh's in that we're raising children in the church, and we were having a youth ministry gathering outdoors years ago when I was potty training Xander. And I'm going to choose my words carefully here, but I kid you not, we are locked into the gospel presentation and the kids are like hanging on the words and it's response time. And there is my son right there deciding that he needed to go to the restroom right there. Right there, right there, right there. I was devastated. It just interrupted everything. And we had a good laugh about it. And how do you recover from that? You just roll with it. And then on a second one is I've done girls ministry for a really long time. I love teenage girls. And I host them in my home for Bible study. And I had this girl, her name was Mackenzie, and she just every week wanted to make sure she was seen, known, and heard. And I mean that in every sense of the word. She came wearing the craziest clothes and all the girls are judging her. You know how girls can be. They look a girl up to, floor to toe, to head to toe, to floor to toe. I mean, oh my goodness, sideways, up and down. And she just was that girl that just made her presence known. But I want to tell you, as disruptive as she was, and her presence was always noticed. Here she comes. Everybody thought it in their mind. And all of my adults would look down because when it was time to assign her to a group, they would look down because they did not want her in their group. But can I tell you that God transformed this young woman, transformed before my very eyes. After 7 years of her coming to my home, that chick is out changing the world. So that's one of the things that I'm looking forward to most about this interview is Kim Botto just gives some really practical steps and just things for us to watch for as ministry leaders. There's a reason why kids are doing the things that they're doing in our church. And so we just have to be mindful and watch.
That is awesome. Marianne, you reminded me of an adult disruption that took place. And I want to share this one to kind of talk about a newer feature that we have added to our website recently. I was over and I got to talk very carefully here, in a closed country, and we got permission to go into a closed country over in Asia. And as a result, while we did get invited in, we're still not allowed to go into tons of details about this. And God has been so powerful and moving in some places over in Asia with us being able to take discipleship in with an emphasis on family ministry. And I know from this same country that there are missionaries' visas that have been revoked and removed, and they have been kicked out of this country. And when I got a chance to go in there in this would have been 2019, we did a family ministry conference over 2 days. And if you could call it a mini D6, that's what it was. And there was we had a large crowd showed up, and there's a lot of stories I could tell in the background of this. It's one of those places where the citizens of this country get rewarded for reporting Christian activity. And, I was, the 6-foot white American man walking around in a place where nobody else looked like me. It wasn't in the mainland portion of this country. And I know people were calling and reporting us, and you just kind of lived in fear. I got profiled many times going through the airports on this trip and in other places. But in our audience of all of these people who came together, there is a infatuation for the people of other countries to wear American t-shirts that have American sayings on it, whether it's Nike or Adidas or, movie stars or whatever. Well, this one lady came in with, I kid you not, they were 7-8-inch letters large across there, and it said sex. That's all it said. S-E-X, sex. And she's sitting in the audience, and I pull one of our other leaders who is bilingual in that country and in where we were, and she was one of our key leaders and a female. And I said, you really need to talk with this lady. And we talk through that, we don't need to embarrass her. We don't need, because we all agreed she just wore it because she thought it was cool, and she had no idea what it said. And, I said, that's how we need to talk to our kids too when they mess up. We don't need to use guilt. We don't need to use shame. We just need to inform and share what a path they need to walk in on is. Right. And we were able to do that. But I say all that to say this: we installed recently on our website a giving button, and we've invited people to come in and give. And one of the major areas that you will be supporting is our initiative into other countries with family ministry and discipleship. We're now ministering in 6 other countries with this ministry of D6, and it is making a huge difference, both closed and open countries. And we can't do this without your support. And so if you want to see discipleship reach way beyond America, go to d6family.com, click on our giving button. And when I invite you in, I need to tell you, I am a giver. I personally support monthly on this, and we would love to invite you in to be a supporter. And you say, well, what does that also support? Well, we support our chaplains. We support D6 Family Ministry around the world. This allows us, it's kind of like most Christian colleges cannot operate without significant giving, even though they charge for tuition, they charge for room and board. And Christian colleges are more expensive than secular colleges. But there is a ratio by which their students' room and board and tuition is reduced some 20 or 30% because of giving. Otherwise, that would even be higher. That is also true in Christian publishing today. And so we are able to exist and do what we do because of many of you are willing to support. And if you're not one of those, we'd invite you to come in and be part of that. So at this point, I'm going to jump out of that, leave it in your hands, and we would desire your prayers. We would also desire your support. But this is what allows us to continue to do like we are right now, free podcast weekly. We don't charge for these, but we do this so that we can minister and be an encouragement to you. And we love those who encourage us by praying for us and supporting as well. We're going to take a commercial break, and when we come back, we're going to have our interview with Kim Botto.
Are you seeking clarity in your vision for family ministry? Randall House Publishing has brought together 15 ministry experts to provide a resource that offers practical ways to measure and adjust every aspect of ministry. Recalibrate, a new measure for family ministry, is one of our best-selling family ministry titles. The book covers topics including cultural challenges, staff and volunteer dynamics, meaningful conversations, prodigals, and many more. The 15 contributors bring to the table their depth of ministry experience as they offer guidance in children's ministry, youth ministry, churched kids with unchurched parents, marriage ministry, and the art of family conversations, along with several other categories. Let these experts give you a clearer vision for the future of your ministry. Visit d6family.com today to order your copy of Recalibrate. All royalties from the sale of this publication go to support D6 International.
Hey everybody, I have Kim Botto, and I know that's how you say it because I just checked to make sure.
That's right.
She's with us today, and I'm so glad to have you. Welcome to D6.
Thanks, Jeremy. It's fun to be here.
Kim she leads the Kids Club and student ministry and initiatives around vulnerable kids at Crossroads, a church with locations in Kentucky and Ohio. She's an adoptive mom. She knows the joys and challenges from a parent's perspective as well as from those supporting families caring for vulnerable kids. I really love the way of that description. I think it's a really cool. We can talk more about that. Kim's passion is supporting parents as they build healthy, thriving families and helping churches welcome all kids and their families, especially the most challenging ones.
Yes, those are my kids.
Okay, so I saw a video online, and you were teaching it. I guess it was at your church,
right?
And you quoted the Beatles, and you said that they got it wrong. That got my attention. I was like, nobody should slander the Beatles.
Are
What's
you a
up
Beatles
with that?
fan?
I mean, no, but I feel like we shouldn't slander them. I mean, goodness, Kim, that was a little controversial for me. But what did the Beatles get wrong?
The song "All You Need Is Love."
Yeah.
You want to sing it for us?
Well, I don't know. Do you want to sing it?
No, I don't. I don't.
Don't make me vulnerable.
Yeah. I don't definitely. You don't want me singing it. Yeah, but they talk about all you need is love. Love is all you need. And I think as parents and those of us who work in the church, a lot of times that's what we think. A kid who maybe has challenges or a parent who's going through a hard time, they just need love. And while love is important, there are different strategies that we may need to use with a kid who's been through trauma.
Yeah.
And love alone won't do it.
Wow. Now that you in your bio, we talked about there's this term. I'm going to make sure I get it right. Vulnerable kids. Now, describe what is that? What does that include?
That would be a child who has come from a hard place. A hard place being any kind of thing in their background where maybe they've experienced trauma, could be a divorce in the family, could be they've been abused, neglected. It's a wide range of things that have a dramatic impact on a kid in their development.
And in your church setting, you work with those kids specifically?
I work with all of them. I mean, all the
Okay.
kids. So
Gotcha.
I lead kids and students, but we have a very large population of foster and adoptive kids.
Yes.
And kids from group homes. So those are, of course, the most vulnerable. If you have lost your birth parent, that makes you very vulnerable.
Absolutely. So you're speaking at D6 about ministering to kids who've experienced trauma. In fact, you told me you just finished that.
Right,
and so
right.
I want to steal from you some of the things you shared. How do we minister to kids in our church? Because I think ministers in general, we have all of us have these kids, but identifying them, and then once we identify them, actually knowing how to respond to them, we can easily mess this up. And actually, instead of doing good, we can do bad unintentionally, can't we?
Yes, yeah.
How do we, teach us from that seminar? What?
I think, first of all, we have to understand that kids are different than they were 20 years ago. And strategies that may have worked really great at home or in the church 20 years ago simply don't work now. And we have millions of kids in the U.S. who've experienced trauma. We have hundreds of thousands of kids who are in foster care. And in order to create a safe place for them at church, we may need to look at our techniques that we use, particularly around behavior in kids and student ministry.
Yeah. And haven't you noticed that there was a time when you could think of a family coming to church every week or every, but the pattern, and I imagine with these kind of kids as well, I bet you don't see them as often, and how can you connect with them when it's so inconsistent?
Well, part of the challenge is that parents who are raising kids who've experienced trauma, these kids often have behaviors that are really challenging. And Dr. Karen Purvis, she has a quote that I love. It says, "Behavior is the language of kids who've lost their voice." So they're talking to us.
Wow.
It just might not be in a way that we think is socially acceptable.
That is great.
So we as a church need to pursue these families. And if their kid does behave in a way that's difficult, let's try some different strategies to create a safe place for this kid and for every other kid who's there. And that's going to mean partnering with the parent, reaching out to the parent, because parents of adoptive and foster families, do you know where they say they feel the most rejected?
Don't say church.
Yes, the church. And I think part of that comes from, because as a church, we're encouraging them. You know, James 1:27, go care for the orphan. And I think sometimes in the church, we don't realize what comes with that. Because when a parent goes out and brings a child who's been orphaned into their home, that kid has a suitcase filled with baggage or filled with stuff. And a lot of it isn't great stuff.
Yeah.
And so we need to help them heal. And one of the best ways we can help them heal is to foster relationships within the church. And support the family, make them feel welcome.
So, the child, I think I want to make sure I make a note of something that you said. The child who misbehaves. I want our listeners to kind of slow down for a second and hear that, because when I say the child who misbehaves or disrupts or is disruptive, if you're listening and you're a minister, most likely 1, 2, maybe 3 faces just popped into your head immediately. And what you're trying to say is that behavior is speaking louder than any words they could ever say from their heart.
Yes. Very good, Jeremy.
Yeah.
Very good.
I want people to hear that, because it is so easy to just be frustrated. Because it is so easy to just lose patience with it.
Absolutely. I've done it. I've lost patience with them. But I think when I start looking at that kid as not a kid that is intentionally misbehaving, but maybe it's a kid that when I tell him to stop doing something, they really don't know how. It's not that they're making a choice not to do what I'm saying. They simply can't. So we can come alongside them and coach them and train them in how they do respond.
And now I'm going to play devil's advocate too, because I can hear it all. I can hear it all across the interwebs as they're listening to this. Because we still have to maintain order, because there is, for one kid in trauma, there's 20, 30, 40, 50 who have not come from that, and we're trying to do something with them as well. So how do we manage that? How do we do that?
Well, for one, the techniques that work with kids from trauma are actually great with all kids. And they can even work with your spouse.
Now teach me.
That's right. Because what we do then is we're focusing on relationship. We're not focusing on the behavior. Now, sometimes there are behaviors that we absolutely positively have to stop, and have to stop quickly, because we want our ministry to be safe for all kids. But there are strategies that we can use. And one simple term, this is also from Karen Purvis, she says, connect before you correct. So instead of immediately going to the behavior, we connect with the kid. I'll say, Jeremy, wow, I can see your fists are all balled up and you're angry. And then I can go on to talk to you about why we don't hit kids. But I then have connected with you, and then you're going, oh, she gets me. She understands. And what we found is by teaching the leaders in the room some of these strategies, then all of a sudden the room's calmer for everybody, and they feel like they're having wins. Because I'm telling you, the compliant kids, well, they're compliant. But if we can get a kid who's typically non-compliant and has a really hard time participating in our ministry, if we can get a kid like that to hear about Jesus and start repeating what Jesus is doing in his life, and you'll keep those volunteers forever.
That's right.
They won't leave.
All right, so I'm going to take a quick break.
Okay.
We're listening to Kim Botto. She's talking to us about kids who've experienced drama, kids that have come from adoptive and foster homes, and we have a lot more to talk about after the break. We'll continue with Kim Botto.
Create lasting memories with your family this Christmas as you prepare your hearts for celebrating the coming of Jesus with the new D6 Everyday Advent Kit. Whether you have children at home or not, you will value the daily scripture readings and short devotions about the names for Jesus. For every day of the month, you will find a different family activity, as well as tools and instructions for a simple ornament that you can make together to remind you of the name of Jesus that you studied that day. Many ideas are provided, and some will work better for your family than others. The goal is for you to pick the suggestions that work and avoid feeling pressure to do it all. Even if all you do is reveal the name of Jesus for a given day and read the short devotional thought, you have succeeded in helping your family focus on Jesus, the reason for this season. Order your Advent Kit while supplies last at d6family.com.
Hey, everybody, we're back. We're talking to Kim Botto. Now, Kim, another great topic that you're covering here at D6 is you're talking about adoptive families. And you said you know this personally, right?
Right.
What's your story behind that?
Okay, so we have 5 kids. Our first 3 were our bio kids, and then we adopted our youngest when she was 10, and then we adopted from Ukraine, and then we went back and adopted her roommate a couple months before she turned 16.
Wow.
So our youngest 2 were adopted.
Wow. Okay, and so you've learned, obviously.
Yes.
And now what are you sharing with us at D6? Give me some highlights from your seminar on this.
Well, actually, back to your first question about the Beatles song, we thought we were pretty awesome parents. Our first 3 kids we thought were pretty great. And what we realized is the strategies that we used with them actually weren't effective with our youngest 2 daughters because of their background and where they'd come from. Something like timeout. With our bio kids, timeout was awesome. And I think timeout actually is sometimes more for the parent than it is for the kid, but it worked well.
Fair enough.
That's right. But with our youngest 2, they'd spent their whole life in timeout. So instead we did time in, where if there was something that needed correction, rather than send them to their room to think about it, we then brought them in closer with us and would sit and talk through it and help them process because they hadn't had anybody to process with before.
Good. What are some other strategies? Give me some more.
I think focusing on the relationship piece, realizing that, as a parent, it's a marathon, not a sprint. So we're not trying to, like with all 5 of our kids, but especially our youngest 2, we weren't trying to just get them to do something in the moment. We were trying to build a character, integrity in them, and help them to be everything that God wanted them to be. And so when you start looking at that, looking at the long game instead of just in the moment, that will change the way that we respond in many situations.
So there's a tension. I want to ask you about this because I'm very curious about this. There is and has been a movement about adoption, and it usually starts with some. I've seen plenty of video campaigns where it says, if there are this many Christians,
right,
if every Christian adopted someone, there would be no need for adoption. Those kind of thoughts, and love that. But in the end of the day, there have been people who would adopt and then figure out, unfortunately, as they go through, that this wasn't for them,
right?
And they have to return the child.
Oh gosh, yes.
Which is a miserable thing. So I think what I'd like some help with is maybe somebody who might be considering adoption and be afraid. There's thinking, because nobody wants that scenario, right? Nobody's like, oh yeah, that's what I desire.
Right.
But that's got to be the number one fear for someone that's considering adoption is, I don't want to get to that place. What are some ways that we can think through that decision and help us get there?
Well, I think if we can back up a little bit and not just look at the individual parents, but look at the church, what the church can do is really come around those families and support them. Because so many families, when you read these stories of families who, well, you referenced, send them back, they get to a point where they don't know where else to go. And I'm not saying it's right, but I've read into some of those, and they have called agency after agency. They have tried to get mental health help. They have tried to get support, and they can't get support. And that's where we as a church can come around and give them meals, give the parents night outs. I have talked to adoptive parents who they haven't had a night out with their spouse for years because they don't have community around them. So for people who are wondering whether or not they should do it, or maybe they're a little afraid, or a lot afraid, would consider what kind of community that you have around you. You need community. And we're not all called to take a kid into our house 24/7. Maybe if you're thinking, man, I'm not sure that's it, maybe that's God telling you it's not it. And maybe what you're supposed to do is go mow the lawn of a foster family down the street. Or maybe there's a child down the street who's having a difficult time, and you can take him out in the yard and throw baseball with him a couple nights a week. Just because the more healthy relationships kids from trauma have, or any kid, the more likely they are to heal.
I love it. All right, so in that video that I referenced earlier, you quoted Josh Shipp. And
Yes.
I loved this quote. Wanted to make sure our listeners heard it and want to hear you talk a little bit about that. This is what he said. Every kid is one caring adult away from being a success story. That is fabulous.
Yes.
I love that.
Yeah.
And that, if you're recruiting volunteers in your church, you need to
Yes.
hear what I just said. Every kid is one caring adult away from being a success story. That's a great pitch to get a volunteer.
Well, Ann, are you familiar with Josh Shipp?
I am,
Okay,
yes.
so that's what happened to him. He bounced from foster home to foster home to foster home. And then his dad, Rodney, wouldn't let Josh push him away. And he stuck right there by him. And I love this quote because I think when we look at the number of kids in foster care, the number of kids who've experienced trauma, it's very easy to say, oh my gosh, it's too big, I can't do anything. But if we look at what Josh said, one kid, we're just asking you to invest in one kid. And by investing in that one kid, that's going to have ripple effects, because then all of a sudden, if they're in a healthier place, then the people that they continue to interact with as they get older, their spouse, their kids, their coworkers, they're going to be positively affected because you invested in that kid.
So good. Such a great quote. And thank you so much. If you guys want to follow Kim Botto, she works at her church is crossroadskidsclub.net. That's a site you can go to see more about what she's doing. And I'm sure they can find you. These people are good on the internet, on the interwebs. They'll track you down.
That's right. Be a
Thank
detective.
you so much for being at DC.
Thank you, Jeremy. Thanks for inviting me.
Us.
Thank you.
Wow. I can speak from personal experience that really that touched my heart, and it really reminded me of a sobering truth within the church, that many people that have children that may have behavioral issues, sadly, these families do feel most rejected at the church because they really don't fit in. And her reminding us that one size does not fit all when it comes to ministering kids, and we need to be adaptive and flexible and listen, and as much as anything, empathize, looking past the behaviors. She made that one statement, and I'm sure, this was probably resonated with you and Marianne and Ron as well, but behavior is the language of the kids who have lost their voice. And it just brings me to tears, to be honest, because, Lena posted in every one of our kids' classrooms right at the door as a reminder, in all of our classrooms, that reminder, it says, those hardest to love are those who usually need love the most.
That's huge. I think there's going to be a lot of people posting that saying on their classroom doors this coming week. Josh, that's brilliant. I think too that whenever we bump into the kids that are using behavior, acting out in any way, any of these areas, know this, that while that may frustrate some of our volunteers or teachers for the moments of church, realize that their parents are encountering this every moment of every day that they're at home, and especially in this COVID time. And I don't, people may write us hate mail, but I'm just going to be blunt and raw here. There are parents who are looking for a brief reprieve or an escape for a few moments. They love their kids dearly, but they need that chance to escape, but they don't know if they can trust the church with those moments and with their kids. And so that's that reminder for why we need to be better at this.
That's right. I think I was really challenged by don't assume. I think that's just what I kind of took away from this, is that it's so easy to make assumptions about people based on their behavior. And she said this, their behavior is speaking on behalf of their heart. And behavior modification is always easy. Heart shepherding is hard work. I am a wonderful cop. I can modify behavior all day long. If you know me, you know this about me. Okay. But at the end of the day, the heart work, the world changing work, is shepherding the heart. And I just love that she, kind of brings those two together and just talks about how their behavior is a condition of the heart. Don't get so locked into behavior, mom and dad and ministry leader. Go after their heart, go beyond their behavior to their heart. That is transforming to me. And then another thing that she said, that she quoted Karen Purvis, and she said, connect before you correct. Oh my goodness. Yes, I love that. That is a passion of all three of ours on this conversation, is we are always talking about connecting and building relationships. And I love that. Always connect before you correct. That is such good wisdom as we minister to difficult children and students in our ministry, for sure.
Girl, I'm taking that point from you that you said. Yeah, I think, to summarize, you said heart work is hard work.
Yes.
And I'm like, just our people need to know we are in the heart work business,
That's right.
and I think that that she says, we have to look out for behaviors, because a lot of times there are typically indicators that more is going on there, and empathy is key. When I first started in ministry, I was the one, like Ron said, I would have been offended by saying, parents saying, I just need a break. And I'm like, I'm not here for you to have a break. But now I literally, this past week, I celebrated the fact when a parent checked their child in after church, she literally raised her hands up, leaving our kids there, and said, whoo, I got a break for a little bit. And I said, yes, you do, girl, you go enjoy it. And, there's a part of me that would have in my early years maybe been a little offended by that. But now I've learned to celebrate it, because she has 4 children. And I was like, yes, girl, you do need a break. I get it.
But her raising her hands to you, Josh, was the highest compliment, because it said, I trust you.
That's right.
I trust leaving my kids here. Yeah. So to our listeners, does your parents trust leaving their challenges with you in those ministries? I want to, as we kind of close out, let me refer you back to a previous episode. It was episode 225. Rich Mace also talked on this topic. And so, these are just a couple of the experts that we have in this arena, and they're go-to people. And I have no doubt they wouldn't mind you contacting them to ask more questions. And we want you to feel free to do so. So we're praying for you this week. We're praying for your time in ministry, that you would reflect God moments in your life and the illustrations that God has prompted you to share, and tell these stories and do the heart work, knowing it is the hard work. And what a great, great challenge that we've been given today.
You've been listening to the D6 Podcast. You can learn more about D6 at d6family.com.